This is the third video in the tutorial series for the Entrelac dishcloth. In this tutorial, I will be showing you how to do the second tier on the dishcloth. So in the first video, I showed you how to do the base triangles, which are these yellow triangles that are across the bottom. Now, we also cast on and then we worked the base triangles. In the second video, I showed you how to work the first tier on top of the base triangles. We had a left triangle, 3 center triangles, and a right triangle. Now, if you've missed those 2 videos, you can check them out on my YouTube channel, and I will have links below. I also have a video on how to do the magic knot, so if you've missed that video, you can also check that out, and that just shows you how to get your yarn connected right at the edge so that your next tier is the different color. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to do the second tier, and the second tier is very similar to the middle triangles on the first tier. However, we're going to be working in this direction. So it's going to be a little bit different only because how you're picking up the stitches, and we do start with 1 stitch at the end, but other than that, it's pretty much the same. So we're going to start by picking up stitches. Now, we ended the first tier with a 1 stitch left over at the end. So we're going to count that first stitch as, or that last stitch I should say, from the first tier as our first stitch on the next tier. So we only need to pick up 5 stitches along this edge because we already have 1 stitch and all of our blocks are 6 stitches. And what I want to do on this is I want to make sure that I'm picking up this final chain as my last stitch, just so that I can make sure that I'm close to the edge here. So I'm going to count back because I'm pretty sure that I don't want to pick up that first part. I think that's going to be that first stitch. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where I'm going to start picking up my stitches. So you're just going to start by picking up and knitting 5 stitches across this edge. Now I am picking up just 1 leg of that stitch along the edge, 1 leg of that chain. That's how I prefer to do this. You can pick up two legs if you prefer that, but I prefer the look of just picking up the 1 leg. Once you've picked up your 5 stitches and you have a total of 6 stitches on your right needle, you're going to slip the last stitch back to the left needle. So you'll have 1 stitch from the current tier and 1 stitch or next to the previous tier. So we're going to do an SSK, slip, slip, knit with the last stitch or the first stitch of this tier and the first stitch of the next tier. So we're going to do SSK, and we'll have to make sure that our yarn is a little bit snug there and knit those together. And then that completes row 1 of the second tier of the first triangle. Then we're going to backwards knit, or if you prefer to turn your work, you can purl backwards all the way across back to the beginning of the row. And that is row 2. Row 3 is slip the first stitch, just like we did on the other tiers. Slip the first stitch, and we're going to knit across to the last stitch. So we have 1 stitch here, and we're going to do an SSK, slip, slip, knit with the next available stitch on the next block. So we're joining those stitches together. And then the next row, which would be row 4, we're going to either knit backwards or purl backwards, depending on if you're turning your work. And again, if you've missed my tutorial on knitting backwards and you would like more instruction on that, you can check out that video as well. I'm not going to go into detail on how to knit backwards so that you stay on the right side row, the right side of the work. It just makes doing entrelac so much easier. Then the next row is slip the stitch and knit across. Now all the rows in this tier are going to be the same, other than the row where you pick up the stitches, because you're always going to knit to the last, and then you're going to do an SSK, and then you're going to purl backwards or knit backwards. I mean, so turn your work and purl or knit backwards. So this tier 2, is very easy compared to tier 1, because you only have to know basically one row or 2 rows, because you slip and then knit across, and then you're knitting backwards just straight. So again, we're going to knit across to the last stitch, and you're going to do these 2 rows until you've used up all the stitches on that triangle, on this first tier triangle. You're not decreasing your stitches. You're always going to have 6 stitches on the current block that you're working on. Slip that first stitch and knit. Oops, don't want to split the stitches. And SSK. And that means I have 1 more, or 2 more rows actually, because I got to get back over and then come back to finish off this triangle. And then last row is just again slip and then knit across to 1 stitch. And SSK. And in this situation, actually that's on backwards. Oops. In this situation, we are not going to go back the other way. We're going to stay here, because then we're going to pick up stitches along the edge of this triangle. So you'll see, here's my right angle for the base of my triangle. Here's my cast on row. And here is my right side triangle for tier number 1, and we are working our stitches up and over this way. So the next block, we're going to pick up our stitches along the edge of this triangle and work up this way while we pick up and knit together, or SSK, with these stitches, and then we're going to do it again along this block and along this block. The only difference with the second and third blocks on this is that you're not starting with 1 stitch. Now we started with 1 stitch on the end of the first block, but on this one we are not going to start with that 1 stitch. So instead of picking up 5, we need to pick up 6 stitches along the edge of this block. I'll just go through the first couple rows just to make sure. Now on this one, you want to make sure that you have 6 stitches to pick up. So I'm going to look down at my chains that are along the edge and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in this case, I'm going to pick up my 6th stitch right there in that crack. Or I could pick up an extra stitch here, but I think I'm going to pick it up from the last little, what looks like a little chain from the lower triangle. So I'm going to pick up stitches, and I'm going to pick up 6, total of 6. All the triangles in this particular dishcloth that I have here are for 6. However, if you would like to make a larger project or have larger triangles, you can purchase the pattern that I have available on Ravelry, and I will be giving instructions on how to make some larger projects. So again, we've picked up our 6 stitches across that edge of that triangle. We're going to move that first stitch over to the left needle and do an SSK with the first available stitch of the triangle below. See? There we go. And then you're just going to knit backwards or purl if you're turning your work. You just want to make sure that you only go back for the 6 stitches that are for this particular triangle. You do not want to go back into the first triangle because those stitches we're going to need for the next row. So now I have my 6 stitches, and I'm just going to continue this triangle by slipping the first stitch and then knitting across, and slip and knit slip slip knit, and bring it back. So again, all you're going to do is slip and then knit across, SSK, and then either purl back or knit backwards. And like I said, all of the triangles on this tier are going to be done exactly the same. So you just continue in this fashion until you reach, for each of the triangles. Let me get to the end of this row here. So for this tier, you're going to do this one, and then you're going to pick up your stitches along the edge of here and work your triangle. And then you're going to work your triangle up, and then you're going to pick up your stitches along the edge of here, and then you're going to work your triangle up. And that completes the second tier. Now, you now have all the information you need in order to make your dishcloth larger, except for the final tier that will be at the top, that will be similar to this, where you're having just small triangles. So you want to keep repeating tiers 1 and tiers 2 until you have the desired length, making sure that your final tier at the top is going to be a tier 1 triangle set. So we are now on this edge over here, and we are going to start doing a tier 1 back this way. So whenever you're working from left to right, and this is if you are not turning your work, you are going to work a tier 1, and then when you're working from right to left, you're going to work a tier 2. Okay? So you're going to work a tier 1, tier 2, tier 1, tier 2, until you have your desired length, and then you're going to knit your final tier. Before the actual final tier is going to be a tier 1. And then I will have a tutorial coming out in the next week or so with the final tier, so you can finish off your dishcloth. If you ever have any questions regarding any of the techniques that I share in my videos, please feel free to leave me a comment here on YouTube or on Ravelry, or send me a private message, whatever you prefer. I do like to get messages from everybody, and I appreciate you taking the time to send the messages. And I hope you are enjoying this Entrelac series. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now. As always, thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Please feel free to contact me with your comments or suggestions, as I am always trying to improve the show. You can find me on Ravelry, Instagram, and YouTube as Bloomingknitter. You can also find me on Plurk, Twitter, and Pinterest as Bloomingknitter, but I don't frequent those sites as often. I post show updates on Twitter and Facebook, and sometimes to Google Plus and Plurk. I am Miss Aerobics on MyFitnessPal and Fitbit. You can always find all the old episodes as well as links to the tutorials on the blog at www.knittingblooms.com. And you can also follow the show on Facebook. You can email me at knittingblooms@gmail.com, and show notes can be found at knittingblooms.com.